Welcome to ILTV Insider. I'm Maayan Hoffman, Executive Editor at ILTV News. As the war in Gaza slows down and hostage negotiations drag on, the IDF faces growing manpower concerns and political pressure. Meanwhile, Trump says he's ready to act against Iran's nuclear program, but Israel's leadership still doesn't know where his red lines really are. Today, we ask a critical question. Is Israel preparing to strike Iran, possibly without clear backing from the United States? We'll also talk about the storm brewing on American college campuses. Joining me to break it all down are two sharp but very different voices. Ruthie Blum, columnist and editor at JNS, and Nadav Tamir, executive director of J Street Israel and a former senior diplomat. Let's get started. So I want to start with Gaza. The IDF renewed its invasion back already a month ago on March 18th with a very big airstrike. 150 Hamas fighters were reportedly killed in those first 10 days. But since then, the progress has slowed down. They're even calling it a crawl. I was reading in some reports, there's been a very small number of terrorists that are being eliminated. Ruthie, why is the army moving so slowly? And is it really acceptable to continue to put our soldiers on the front lines if we're not going to accomplish the goal?
Yes, well, another question is, how is it that we're still finding tunnels, massive tunnels in Gaza that we didn't find in a year and a half of being in there? That's quite extraordinary. I think the answer always to the question of why we're not using full force has to do with the hostages. Early in the war, it had to do also with Palestinian civilian casualties. We were warned, don't kill innocent people in Gaza, etc. We were warned by the U.S. government. We don't like to kill civilians. But now it's mainly because of the hostages. It's a good question to ask. And right now we're also in negotiations to get as many live hostages out as possible. So the more, and then there's always this balance between how much you attack, how many buildings you explode when maybe there are hostages in there or under them.
Do you agree with this, Nadav? Do you think that the war that we're running right now is a right and okay war to be doing?
No. It's a political war. There is no goals that this military campaign could achieve. Of course, we could kill more people, but strategically, it doesn't give us anything. And what we really need to do is to stop the war, get the hostages back, and let diplomacy work in order to create an alternative to Hamas in Gaza, which is the approach that the Americans and the Arab countries are suggesting to us, and the only reason we don't accept it is because it will be problematic for the survival of this government.
Now, one of the reasons that the Eyal Zamir, at least our chief of staff, is citing is that it's not just an issue of the hostages and it's not just a political war and we're sort of strategically staying in there but not really strategically achieving goals, but also that there's a manpower issue, that we don't have enough soldiers. And in fact, as we know, we haven't been able to move forward with the Haredi draft, the ultra-Orthodox draft bill, and that right now we're kind of at a point where there are tired reservists. And he said, Eyal Zamir, the other day, I found it striking that he said that it is a fantasy to believe we're going to achieve our goals. So, I mean, again, Ruthie, hearing that and hearing what Nadav said, so what are we fighting for if we're not going to achieve the goals?
Okay, so first of all, another report said that he didn't say that that was a fantasy, but it doesn't matter. It's true that there's a manpower problem. The reservists are exhausted. They've been in there, many of them for a very long time, in and out, and some straight through. And then there's Lebanon, let's not forget. There's the northern border, etc. But here's what I would say. Yes, the Haredi draft is an issue, and that, I disagree with Nadav about the war being a political war. But yes, the Haredi draft issue is political. And the reason it is that if the members of the government who are not satisfied with the deal that's arranged about Haredi draft, then they'll quit the government won't fall, then we'll have to have new elections. That is political. But I'd like to say one thing about Haredi draft, and I'm saying this as somebody who's secular and who has sons and son-in-law who fought in Gaza, etc. Though I do believe that any Haredi, especially those who aren't studying full-time, should be drafted, I will say something. So many of my close friends who are secular, their sons and daughters did not serve in the army or do national service or anything. And so I just find very often that when the left is yelling about the Haredi draft, there's not enough focus on those who are, who just didn't go to the army. And that goes also for people in high tech, that goes for people who moved to Berlin, all kinds of people. And so I'm not saying that the Haredim shouldn't be drafted, but I think we shouldn't focus only on them. We have a manpower problem because of the entire society and not just the Haredim.
Nadav, respond to that.
Well, if I'm considered left, so I'm not called to reserve anymore, even though I was an officer and fought in the Lebanon war. My son was in reserve duty until the ceasefire in Lebanon, and he will go back if Gaza will intensify. My son-in-law is going to reserves this week for 2 months. So I don't know where those numbers are coming from. The people that I know are serving. You see many of those people that were called anarchists by the government that are still, carrying most of the load for not only the war, but also for the civilians' efforts that were kept in a vacuum because of the government.
So, Nadav, it's interesting because, as we're throwing all this out and thinking about the ongoing fighting, what also happened just yesterday was that the U.S. approved another 3,000 munitions to bolster our Air Force with this idea that we're actually going to fight harder. So we are, on the one hand, saying we're slowing down as a fantasy to achieve the goals, and on the other hand, we are getting more weapons and ammunition from the United States in order to step up our goals in Gaza. It seems very contradictory. Do you get a sense, Ruthie, that something bigger is going to happen, that we are watching a crawl, but we are on the cusp of something else?
Well, I certainly was hoping so, and I did believe so. I believed that all of this was a build-up to attacking Iran. But what we're hearing out of Washington is not encouraging. There are mixed messages coming out of Washington right now during these talks with Iran. And at first, President Trump said, they may not have nukes, and if they don't give an answer soon, and we're going to do something military, and Israel will lead, etc. And that was encouraging to me. But now Steve Witkoff, the special envoy who's been dealing with the hostages and Iran, and I think he doesn't know anything about, he is a negotiator for real estate, and I don't think he knows anything about the Middle East or Iranian mentality or the mentality of Palestinians in Gaza. But having said that, what he said was, everything Witkoff said sounded very much like the previous Iran deal, which is to say, no, they can have nuclear power, but not nuclear weapons, and we'll need a mechanism to ensure that it isn't. And we've seen that, we've been there, done that. The Iranians, if they sign any deal, it will be a phony deal. They are liars, they're killers. And Israel is going to have no choice but to have to launch a military strike on the facilities.
Well, and it does seem that, one of the things that was said was that with this 3,000 was also the ability maybe to be able to launch some kind of strike by Israel. On the other hand, I'm reading a lot of reports that Netanyahu doesn't actually know what Trump's red lines are. And so we are kind of in the dark. Isn't that very dangerous, Nadav, to have a prime minister who claims to be so close to the president, but to not really understand where we're heading or where the U.S. is heading with the Iran deal?
Absolutely. And I think that what Netanyahu needs to do is to support what Witkoff is trying to do. And I agree that it's very much like the JCPOA. But I even said back then that if someone would have told Trump that the JCPOA is yours or not Obama, he would celebrate it because he wanted to be the deal maker. The only reason why he left out of the deal was the pressure of Netanyahu and some of his backers in Washington, not because the deal was not good. The deal was working. Iran was actually delivering on what they promised during the deal. And when Trump left the deal, this is when Iran broke, and now they're a threshold country, and now they are complete in bed with Russia and China, who used to be part of the JCPOA, the superpowers plus Germany, and now they want to go back to it, and I think it's the right thing to do, and I hope that this time Netanyahu will be a team player and will not try to sabotage the deal.
Though in all fairness, Biden also removed a lot of the sanctions, which then gave Iran money over the last years in order to be able to continue their nuclear program. So not only did America pull out, but they also funded Iran.
No, I think that what Biden did was a realization that you cannot really pressure Iran just by American sanctions. You need an international, and it doesn't make sense. So he was trying to do all kinds of deals. He released many American prisoners thanks to this money and other things, and he was hoping to get back to negotiations, but it was under the Raisi regime in Iran that was not interested in it, that was very kind of felt that the Americans betrayed them when Trump left the JCPOA. But now, with the Pezeshkian government, it's a totally different approach, and I think Trump has a real chance to go back to the parameters of the JCPOA. Of course, it has to be updated because the dates of the sunset clauses and all of that have to be adjusted, but I think that what you hear from Washington is the same kind of language that we had in the JCPOA. It's true that Trump is using, just like with the tariffs and with Canada and Greenland and Panama, he uses a lot of, and that's why he sent some aircraft carriers to the Middle East, and he gave weapons because he believed that could help him in the negotiations, but eventually he does want a deal.
And first of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, just piggybacking on that, Trump did say that he is willing to have Israel strike if needed, but yet at the same time, there is this fear, and I think from what you're describing, that if this deal goes through, our hands in Israel will be tied and we won't be able to attack if it's needed. So Ruthie, how do you react to all of this? Okay,
so first of all, I think that the issue is not whether Netanyahu is a team player, because I don't think you should be a team player if your country is at a risk of an existential crisis with an enemy who vows to wipe you off the map. However, I also don't think that Netanyahu is not being a team player with Washington. In fact, even with the Biden administration, which was completely against this Israeli government and against every move we made and tied our hands, he was a team player. Now, with Trump, it's even more so. What I'm thinking is that Netanyahu and Trump are talking more than we know. Mm. That's one thing. And the other is that, it could be good cop, bad cop. You're absolutely right that Trump wants deals. He says he wants to be the peacemaker. That's totally true. I don't dispute that. But, not every deal is genuine, and especially not with radical Islamist jihadists who have hegemonic ambitions, and so you're not dealing with rational actors, you were dealing with malign actors, and then you have to behave differently. So my question is Netanyahu prepared to, in the event that the Iranians say, great, we'll make a deal, and they lie about it and they hide their nukes and all that, is Israel going to be prepared to go it alone? And here is where I'm not sure, but I don't believe that the Trump administration would be as hostile to Israel as the Biden administration was in the event that Netanyahu says, look, we have to do this because this is a direct threat to us. It is a global threat, but this is a direct threat to Israel.
But would Israel even be capable, Ruthie, of doing that? Because from what I understand, just from speaking again to military experts, of which I am not, but is that, we have limited effect in the ability to target the nuclear facilities in Iran. We would require American weaponry, some coordination, if we truly wanted to be able to destroy the nuclear facilities. Otherwise, you're talking about some damage, maybe setting them back.
Well, first of all, we did destroy much of their air defense mechanism, and so that already gives us an opening. Second, you're absolutely right that we didn't have the proper bunker busters, but I think that that's part of the weaponry that America is delivering to Israel. And second of all, the question is not so much whether we've got the bombs and that we do have the intelligence. Here is where America could be a partner without actually conducting the attack.
And, the other thing that I would add to this whole conversation, which is, lovely to have in a studio, but the reality is that even Trump has said that we believe that Iran is extremely close to getting a nuclear weapon. So negotiations and discussions at a time when they are this close that they could have that weapon next week, is that an existential threat already? Shouldn't we be moving faster, attacking, pushing off, or saying sign a deal today, or
I don't think we have the capabilities. I mean, Iran already have the enriched uranium. So even if we have the bunker busters and we hit in Natanz or Farchin or some of those sites, it's not enough. They're already beyond that point. The only thing we could achieve is to restrain and bring back some of their movement with enrichment and avoid the weaponization of the bomb. And that could be done only by negotiations or by a long period of the US in Iran, like they did in Iraq. You cannot, with a surgical attack, destroy the Iranian nuclear program.
But couldn't Iran attack us during the period of negotiations?
Well, they tried. I don't think they can. We have better capabilities than them. According to international media, we have nuclear capabilities that they don't have. We have a second strike capability. So I actually don't think that the Iranians are irrational. I think they are very rational. They play the long game like you do in the bazaar or in the chess that they invented. But they're rational, and they know that Israel is stronger than them. I think a lot of their rhetoric against Israel is to justify, but the real goal is to keep the regime alive, and they feel under threat by majority of Sunnis in the Middle East who hate them, majority of Arabs and Turks who hate Persians, and this is the reason why they wanted the nuclear bomb, not because of Israel, and I don't think they will get into a fight with Israel.
Well, it's a good point you made also about the regime, and that is that while this is going on, negotiations here, threats of an attack, you have Iranians who may be, hopefully, on the verge of toppling that regime. Now, we don't know because they've tried it before, and when they did it, when Obama was president, he just abandoned them and all that. Now, it's not that the regime change can take place from outside, but internal pressures, again, with sanctions that make the economy really dastardly in Iran. So hopefully there's this combination of forces, among them disgruntlement on the part of the Iranian public. But I'll say just one thing about the rational actors. They're rational in their own worldview. Bernard Lewis, the late great Middle East scholar, used to say that you can't treat Iran the way, let's say, the United States and the Soviet Union had mutually assured destruction. With Iran, you don't have that because they're also jihadists that have the mentality of martyrdom for Allah, and that puts them in a different category from regular states, even the Soviet, even evil states. It puts them in their own category.
So I want us to shift just to one last subject. We only have a few minutes left, but I do want to ask one question about what's going on with the American college campuses and the defunding of those college campuses by the Trump administration, deporting foreign students, cutting their aid, of course, pressuring them to adhere to certain regulations that fight antisemitism, hate speech. All of it sounds, I think, very good on paper, but you see that Harvard yesterday, right, is pushing back. They agreed to take the cut in funding because they said it was hurting their ability to have free speech, First Amendment rights. So should a university risk millions of funding if it doesn't want to address these issues? Do you think, who's right here? Is Trump right? Are the campuses right? Or is there some middle ground? Each of you, answer that question.
Oh, I think Trump is absolutely right. These universities, aside from the fact that they're highway robbers with their tuition, Harvard also gets huge amounts of federal funding and massive amounts of tuition. And students who come from outside, from inside as well, by the way, I think a student wherever he's from, but you come to a campus and instead of going to class, you're protesting on behalf of terrorism. But these are people on visas or people with green cards or people who lied on their forms, etc. I think he's absolutely right. And by the way, it's excellent that universities that long ago stopped focusing on academic excellence and switched all over to DEI and critical race theory and for all the amount of money. Do you realize the amount of money that parents pour into that place? So what if they don't get government funding? Fine, let them fund themselves and let parents decide whether they want or don't want to pay that money out. Let it be private and let there be other universities who compete for excellence.
For full disclosure, I'm a graduate of Harvard. I did my master's at the Kennedy School of Government. Okay. And I watch all the world statistics. Harvard is a leading university in the world. With all the respect to DEI and all of that, they're still the leading institution in the world. I think that what Trump is doing is trying to weaponize anti-Semitic. There is anti-Semitism, of course, and there are many Jews who are concerned, but he uses it because he wants to go after the universities who are the elite of the liberals who think very differently than him. So he used anti-Semitism against what he called kind of the deep state, very similar to what the right is trying to do here with many of the institutions. So I don't buy that. There is a way to deal with anti-Semitism, and it's not the way Trump is doing it. I do believe that Larry Garber, the president of Harvard, knows and understands anti-Semitism. He's a Jew, and he's also very active in preparing the university to deal better with anti-Semitism. But I'm very proud that he stood his ground and is not succumbing to the pressure from Trump that has nothing to do with anti-Semitism.
Do you think that those students who are parading around in masks and, as Ruthie said, skipping class, do you think those students belong in the country, in the United States?
Well, free speech is still a value in the US and hopefully here. Of course, if anyone uses violence, if anyone threatens other students, that's a different story, and the law should deal with them. And the universities were not there. They were not prepared. I think now they're much more prepared, and they did a lot of work since there. But to say that all of the students who demonstrated are either anti-Semites or brutal, people, it's not the reality.
So unfortunately, we are out of time tonight. That's all the time we have to respond. We could talk about this forever, but I do want to thank both of you for being here, both Ruthie and Nadav. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching Insider. Have a safe and pleasant evening.